Letitia Stauch is accused of murdering her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon. His body was found weeks later, hundreds of miles away, in a suitcase under a bridge in Florida. Stauch has pled not guilty by reason of insanity. Her defense claims that she suffered a major psychotic crack when she killed Gannon. And while Gannon was missing, his father worked with investigators and recorded telephone conversations with Letitia. Today, the prosecution is playing one more of those phone calls. I want to welcome, joining us now with all their legal expertise, also forensic psychologist Dr. Carole Lieberman. And Dr. Lieberman, let me start with you first, because a lot of our viewers are watching this trial and Letitia Stauch and saying, she's guilty. No way did she not know right from wrong. But what stands out to you about her psychology as you've been watching this?
Well, it doesn't make any sense, because on the one hand, she's saying she had this temporary insanity very conveniently. It's just during the time that she killed Gannon. But at the same time, she keeps making up all these excuses. So the two things don't seem to go together.
It's fascinating, these excuses and these lies. And we've talked about on the shows with some of our experts that she pivots. I have another question for you, Carole, and that is, in general, not with this specific fact pattern in this case, in general, is it possible, in your opinion, for someone to black out or snap and do something not knowing right from wrong at that moment?
Well, yes, it is. And as a forensic psychiatrist, what I would try to do, well, you said not to talk about this case, but in general, she is an example of a defendant who, even though it doesn't make sense really in the way that she's telling it, there are certain conditions when people can black out for that moment, but it seems like she does have some kind of psychological problems. So I think maybe it would help the defense for a forensic psychiatrist to explain some of these other things. I presume she was examined by a forensic psychiatrist, and because you can tell just from her talking, her phone calls, her demeanor in court, that there are things going on with her that are psychological problems.
And I do think we expect to hear from an expert, and I too can't wait to hear, Carole, what that expert has to say. And Dr. Lieberman, I know that I had my team get in your ear to say, can you talk body language? Because the one thing that I couldn't help but not notice was Letitia's amount of movement as she was being interviewed by the FBI. And again, for context, we know at that time Gannon was still missing and they were questioning her. Tell us about her body language.
Yes. Well, first of all, she really is lapping up all of the attention of the FBI agent. I mean, she would continue for weeks. As long as he was there asking her questions, she could go on forever. And her hands, her legs aren't really making very much movement, but her hands, it's almost as though she's a puppeteer, lifting her hands and doing all kinds of things. Really, it's sometimes when a person does that, describing a certain scene, it can be authentic, like they were really there and they're remembering what it was like and so on. But the way that she's doing it is like to put on a play, to get him to try to believe all of these different things that she's telling him. And, it's like, just watch me and, it's just really, the thing that's really coming across clearly is that this Gannon, he had problems. He had, she's talking about his GI problems, and also she had talked about how he was taking Vyvanse. So I think the underlying issue is that he was just too much for her to handle. She did not have the capacity to deal with him. Not that in any way excuses what she did, but I think that that's really the bottom line.
And just quickly, before I ask Kirk a question, what is Vyvanse typically prescribed for?
With children, it's typically prescribed for attention deficit disorder, ADHD or ADD, hyperactivity, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which of course it's really kind of works in the opposite sense. I mean, usually Vyvanse makes kids more, or people more active, more manic. And so we don't know whether he was, being given that appropriately or what the story was with that. But I think it was too much for her to handle.
All right.